Hello, friends. I am your host, Marisa Serafini, and welcome to my show, Friends and Favorites with Marisa Serafini. I'm going to be talking to all my friends about their favorites. It's just what you think it is. I have a very, very dear friend of mine, Phil Svitek. We go way back. We've worked together for 10 plus years now, going on like 20 and the rest of our lives, basically, because Phil stuck with me for the rest of his life, whether he likes it or not. And a little bit about Phil. He's an amazing filmmaker, editor extraordinaire, author. He's written books, short films, long films, you name it. And a very dear friend of mine. And Phil, thank you so much for being my first friend on my very first real show by myself, podcasting. Here we are. Phil, hello.
It is quite the honor. Yes, I'm very excited to be a part of this and see this grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've had this idea for a long, long time, and you were always, if not the first person to be like, well, I got to talk to Phil, of course. I like to think I know so much about you now over just like all the years and we've worked together and been together and but do I really know you in the way that I think I do? I
You
know
probably
like
do. I mean, you know the good, the
yeah.
bad, and the ugly. So I think you know pretty much the gamut of most things. But we'll find out.
Oh yeah, I mean we'll definitely get into it, and I'd like to actually really start off this whole conversation with we have worked together in the work sense, running AfterBuzz TV or podcasting network, plus all the other networks that followed with it, and we work roommates also. But I want to ask you, like, what do you think makes us friends? What was that like turning point where we became more than just two coworkers who happened to be roommates going through the same shit at work? But what was that moment that you can think of that really made us more than that, that made us truly friends?
I mean, I'm sure there was a earlier inflection point, but I think once we started hosting Anatomy of a Movie, I think our bond of movies, and certainly there were other people there, but I think there was just a kinship right off the bat, with Dimitri, with a John Comerford, with a Sarah Stretton, and anyone else that, kind of was part of the revolving doors. Eventually it became just the trio, you, me, and Dimitri. But that really kind of blossomed into something quite amazing. I mean, we did that show for, I'm going to say 7 years. I know it was at least 7 years. It could be
Yeah.
longer. And, we used to at a certain point do 2 hours per show times two every Friday. So that's 4 hours you're spending, I mean, we spent a lot of time physically together, just through work, but that was like, we were connecting because it wasn't just talking about movies. We were talking about a passion of ours, right? I mean, there's obviously many dimensions to us, but that really shined through, and I certainly enjoyed that. And then that was an offshoot into everything else, our love of books, and then friendships of hanging out beyond just the workplace, and parties, and hikes and all that stuff. So I think if I had to say, that would be it.
Yeah, Anatomy of a Movie. If you guys haven't heard of it, watched it, I believe our stuff is still out there somewhere in the world on YouTube. Look up Anatomy of a Movie, and you will find Phil Svitek, myself, talking literally hundreds of episodes. I mean, we were staring down the barrel of what, 500
We
movies?
surpassed 500. We were looking at, I mean, by the time like we all left, I mean, we were close to 1,000. And I would say, like, I don't know exactly, but like the last year and a half, like you got to kind of go to the earlier episodes. And the nice part is they
Yeah.
stand the test of time. So, pick a favorite movie of yours in that sort of time frame. And, we talked about it. And I think it's very supplementary. But yeah, I think you have to go past the most recent year and a half, because, that one's not indicative of, well, obviously it's not
Of
us.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say go back to the earliest years with you and I, because we started Anatomy of a Movie 2013, and then we just went from there. And yeah, we talked so many movies, and And like, when we went into that, it was more so we had the knowledge, the awareness where like we want to make it evergreen. We want people who are watching this movie for the first time 20, 30 years from now to come back to this conversation and be like, oh yeah, this is still relevant. Um, and
Yeah, and that
like
was a fun
that
time.
was yeah.
Like I still talk to. I mean, Dimitri's always the one who reminds me of how special a time that was because we weren't reviewers. We
No.
were people who loved movies, and we were also filmmakers, right?
Yeah.
Dimitri had worked for, his first movie was Contact. Then, he worked for Technicolor and all these other places, and eventually Exhibitor Relations. You have a certain viewpoint into films yourself in terms of, your knowledge base, and I have my sort of viewpoint as well, and so we were able to bring that together and really highlight what makes, almost kind of like a behind the scenes making of, like they used to do on DVDs and Blu-rays. They don't do so much anymore, with the
I
caveat
miss
that
that.
obviously we weren't involved, but we were able to bring that to light.
Yeah, and I think that was the great thing of when we formulated that panel was that we had the different perspectives. Like you came from the editing, filmmaking perspective. I came from the production side. Dimitri came from the post-production side. And then, we had John who was on the writing side and Sarah who was on the acting side. So with all of us, tend to like form different aspects of the filmmaking, and because we had a good balance of females to male ratios with different perspectives and different ages. I think it really made our panel pretty well rounded for the most
Yeah,
part when it came to filmmaking.
yeah.
And I think in itself was pretty fun to listen to, just listening to us, because I felt like I was always learning something from someone else, even if it was, you know, with our different varying degrees of knowledge. It was fun to learn and listen every week.
Yeah, I mean, this is my mom's opinion, but many times she would not watch the movie and just listen to us. So, for whatever that's worth, it's my mom's opinion, but I always found that special.
Oh yeah, I love your mom. I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't get my parents to watch anything I did. I think they watched maybe one episode of a TV after show, and I couldn't even tell you what. I think it was like maybe my Glee after show that like when I first started off hosting. And when I first started at AfterBuzz, they're like, "Oh, look at what my daughter's doing." But I don't know. They just for some reason could not get into what I was doing, and which is fine, to each their own.
I
But
think, I mean, I've part of it. I mean, they have other interests and children to kind of keep up with, and for the most part, you do a good job of keeping up with them and all that. Um, you know, for me, I think it's my mom's way of like seeing what I'm up to. And
yeah,
it's not just. I remember, we had someone we worked with named Julia, and her parents were in France, so like that was their way of like, and she's basically an only child as well, and so that was her parents' way of seeing what she was up to. So like, I get it. It's a little bit different here and there.
it definitely is different because I am one of 5 and I'm the youngest, and so my parents had 4 other children to keep up with, so I don't blame them for not always, checking in that aspect of my life, and I'm okay with that because there were a lot of things I would say on our shows that I know my parents would not approve of, but that is neither here nor there, so,
But see, what's funny, I know my mom at this point, like almost religiously, pretty much like watches and listens to everything that I do, and yet somehow I just don't let it. I don't know. You got to. For me, I've gotten past a certain point. And also, like, I've watched movies with her that I really love, that whether they have like sex scenes or like, just ridiculous. I'm like, this is me at this point. Like,
yeah.
I appreciate we've gone to a certain part of our relationship where, it's all there. Like she's seen me drunk and she's seen me with you guys. Like we're good at this point.
Yeah. I don't think my parents have ever seen me drunk, which is probably a good thing. You have seen me drunk. I have seen you drunk, blackout drunk, vice versa. I think, we definitely go back when it comes to our solving days. Oh, goodness. Wow. I don't think,
Yeah.
honestly, I think I've drank the most with you than anyone I have ever known in my entire life. I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's definitely a fun thing considering like every time I drink with you, it's more on the fun social aspect than it is in like the depressing aspect, you know?
Yeah, and part of it, it's like we got so few days of like we were all always working so hard that like you just make it so precious and that you take it to like the 11th level just to like make up for all the times that you don't have days off or whatever. So you're like,
Oh
let's
no.
go.
It was way past like 11. It was more like 20. Oh gosh, and the stories that we could say out of solving, but we really shouldn't because what happens in solving stays in solving.
Very much so. Yeah.
But yeah, I think those were when I think about, drinking wine, somehow I always go back to solving with you and everybody else that
I mean,
was brave enough to party with us.
here's the PG version of it, right? Like Solvang, you leave on a Friday night. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours maximum, which is way closer than a Vegas. And certainly, when people go wine tasting, they go to Napa. That's too damn long, right?
Right.
Solvang is like a 5x5 town, and so you're all within the vicinity, and not that it's cheaper, but like you're certainly not driving to places and so forth. And I remember one time, let's just say our friend Dario, I think, it could have been somebody else, but they were like, oh, the line to the bathroom is so long. I'm like, dude, our hotel is closer than the bathroom of the place we're at. Just go to the hotel.
Right.
So those are the PG
Uh-huh.
advantages of going to Solvang.
Oh man. Oh, solving, man. Yeah, what else can we say about solving? That they were fun times, and those were like the weekend where because I think what there was 3 different times we went to solving.
Yeah, we tried to
At
make it a
least.
sort of annual thing as much as we could.
Yeah, and and I feel like our party just grew every year. We started with like what 4 people, and then it came to like 8, and then it grew to like what 13 at one point. It was crazy.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's fun because like you can't lose track of anybody, right? Like at a certain point, like we always used to do everything together, but then it was nice, like people could splinter off and go do stuff, and like you just see them across the street, like hey, so like
we're
you
like, oh,
literally
what's up?
couldn't lose each other. And we had enough activities of like, all right, dinner's at 6, so be there.
Yeah, we're like, "Oh, we'll see you down the block." Or I think at one point, a few you went to go to like some smoke shop and smoke cigars, where I went like down the street and kept shopping at like books or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, at one point we all would just like break up, do our own things, and then like congregate back to for dinner or something.
And
Yeah, those
it's
are
a,
fun times.
just this kind of hints at all of it. It's a town that like literally pretty much most places close at 8. You're lucky if it stays open till 10, right?
Yeah.
So the nice part is it's a town that wakes up early, and people that weren't indoctrinated, I would say to them like, we're gonna get up early. Like breakfast is at 8. Like that's it. Like you're
Yep.
dressed and ready to go at 8. They might have beers, but certainly by 10 a.m. we're at our first wine tasting. Like, oh, I don't know, Phil seems a little intense about this. Like, I like to sleep in on the weekends. Maybe I'll get up at like noon. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm not blowing
No,
the
this
day.
is scheduled.
Yeah, like, and it wasn't so much that I was like, hey, let's go. Like, it just was. We have a ticking time clock. When
We
8
do.
o'clock hits, 8 p.m., they're shut down. You
Right, it
know?
was crazy because we had was it, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong because there was a lot of alcohol involved. We had like Friday night to Sunday afternoon to do all this and be back at AfterBuzz by like 3 p.m.
Yeah, so
on
we
a
have to be
Sunday
sober. Yeah, we have to be sober. That was the whole thing. Like,
or
it's not like you're
relatively
recovering.
hungover.
Yeah, you're not like recovering on Sunday. You have to be recovered on Sunday.
Fully
So like,
recovered.
that's your ticking time clock.
And it was crazy. I remember being yeah, because now we're just going back on our solving train. Because I was the morning person. I was the person who loved waking up in the morning and on time. And someone yelled at me because there was one point we were all in the hotel in one room, And because I'm the morning person and the early bird, someone yelled at me for setting the alarm at like 5:30 a.m. just so I could go to the bathroom and take a shower before everybody else woke up. They're like, "What the fuck are you doing, Marissa? Sleep." And I'm like, "Well, I got to get the bathroom first because all you guys are going to steal the bathroom. And there's only one bathroom and there's like 12 of us." So,
Yeah, it was like a giant
yeah.
suite. And so the girls got the bed, the guys got the couch, people got
Three
the
of us shared an
floor.
airbed. I think it was like me, Keaton, and Sarah shared the airbed. Oh my god, it
Sarah
was
never went.
what were we doing? Who was it? Oh my god, yeah,
Whitney, yeah, Sarah
Whitney.
never went.
Someone,
Um,
someone.
yeah,
That's how much alcohol was involved. I can't even remember who all went, but it got crazy.
yeah.
Not gonna
So
lie, it got crazy.
space-wise, it was big enough. We just didn't have enough beds and so forth, and obviously just one bathroom. So like, and yeah, we were saving any money we could. I mean, that was price-wise, like, it was like $110 for the entire like suite.
We saved a lot of money,
Yeah, it was like 10 people to one room.
and like
One
we
year we messed up.
definitely lied. We
One year we
definitely lied
messed
to the
up.
hotel.
Yeah, one year, remember we messed up and we got like this tiny room, and we're like,
Oh
what are we supposed to
right.
do with this?
All right.
Yeah, so
Oh, good times. Good times indeed. Well, speaking of which, I was gonna start with what's your favorite movie, but now we're talking about alcohol and being how drunk we were. I think you know what my answer is, but I want to know yours. What is your favorite alcoholic beverage? Is it wine? Is it beer? Because I've seen you drink a lot. And I don't mean that in like a very disrespectful way, but it's like I've seen you drink like different types of alcohol. So I don't think I really know your type of drink. So what's your favorite beverage
usually my
alcohol?
go-to at home is like a beer, or like when I'm out and about, just because it's the fastest and it's usually relatively cheaper. But I do enjoy a wine. I grew up on vineyards and stuff like that, so I do have a palate for wine.
You grew up on
Um,
your vineyard? How did I not know this?
yes, my family has vineyards.
Shut
A-
up.
Ask Sarah. Sarah's been to the vineyards.
What? And you haven't invited me?
You have to go to Slovakia.
Oh, what?
um,
How did I not
yes.
know this? See, this is why I'm having the show. So I'm learning more about my friends.
I'm
All right.
surprised Sarah didn't
No,
regale you of our trip to Slovakia.
I am now mad that she didn't tell me. You grew up next to a vineyard?
I didn't grow up
Okay.
like we have a vineyard. Like, yeah.
You
So,
have. Wow. This is just taking me back to, the parent trap. Like, yeah, me and my dad, we own a vineyard. Oh my God. All right.
yes.
Tell me
So,
this vineyard, your family owned it?
yes. I
Or
mean, they still own it. So it's eight. We produce 8 barrels of white, two of red. My grandfather likes Riesling, so that's one of the wines that he's most known for. And yeah, I mean that's kind of where we're at. So
that's awesome. Is it like is it like really good tasting? What's their label? What's it called?
I mean that's the thing. It's not like we it's strange. Like that's the part of it that I'm still trying to figure out. Like I think because none of it. It's not like we sell to any sort of wineries, because sometimes a lot of places buy grapes and stuff like that, so we don't necessarily
Mhm.
do that. And not a lot of people don't do that. They just kind of make the wine and that's it. And sometimes you'll sell it locally to people in literally like just like a Coca-Cola bottle, like you just fill it up and then sell it to them
Yeah.
for whatever. So it's not labeled in that way. I really think it is just like this Eastern European sort of depression aspect of like you work yourself to the bone, and then your only reward for it is to like drink your own wine. So
Mhm.
I think like it's the sort of vicious cycle of odd depression and alcoholism.
Well, it's like some people have their own, garden in the back, and so they grow their own fruits and vegetables, and like, but they don't sell it to a marketplace or a farmer's market or some, commercial business. They
Yeah,
just
and
have
a
it in
lot
their
of people.
backyard for their own use.
Yeah, and we had that too, and that's the thing. Like a lot of Europeans in certainly the rural areas have that sort of setup. And yeah, I mean, even people don't necessarily have like quote unquote vineyards. they might have just like a simple row of grapes and just, produce half a barrel or something like that for our own stuff. Like it's very much like part and parcel of a certain, that certain lifestyle.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if I ever go to Slovakia, then I'll be like, "Yo, show me this vineyard because I need to at least taste it." That's that's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, so I have
I
free wine for
never knew
life.
that. That's awesome. See, my family has free eggs for life because I come from a farming community, and my uncle has like 20 chickens. So we always had a surplus of eggs. So fortunately, with this crazy economy now and the whole, inflation in that aspect, and eggs being the price that they are, fortunately we have eggs we don't have to worry about. But unfortunately, that doesn't benefit me out here in California. That benefits my family in Illinois, but not here.
Yeah.
Uh, that's that's so cool. I can't wrap my head around the fact that you had a vineyard and you never told me.
I
Uh,
mean, it never came. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was like one of the things I would scream in Solvang, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe you were just too drunk to remember
we
that
were
aspect.
way too drunk to remember. Oh my goodness, you might have, and I
I
just
certainly did because, like,
completely.
all of our friends, whether it's Tiana Hobson, Daryl Kristen, like, even like a Krista or Jeff Graham, they all knew that like I have a vineyard. Like that's all. When we went to Solvang, that's all I would ever talk about.
Huh. Huh. Maybe I just have selective hearing and just did not remember that. Wow. I'm so sorry, but that's so awesome.
All good. I call it BC brain, before COVID brain. Not that like
Yeah.
you necessarily had. It doesn't imply that someone had COVID. It just implies that anything before the start of COVID, I'm like that's a whole different era.
Yeah, that's a whole different lifetime. And I think the thing is like we were constantly together when we worked together at AfterBuzz TV. So it was more so like if I knew about you, I knew it, and like it didn't surprise me. But now that I think so much time has passed since we both left that place, that it's like, oh, right, we took a step back from each other in a good way. Where now it's like, oh, you also have this and going on in your life, which I didn't know about. That's cool. We've individually. I feel like we kind of conflated our lives together, and now we can finally find our own individuality apart in a
Yeah.
good way.
Yeah, it's like that, I forget the exact quote, but when people go in one direction and think the same thing, it's a cult. When people go in one direction with different thoughts, it's a movement. And not that it's one and the same, but I think now, certainly, yeah, we have, as you're pointing out, we have different lifestyles and so forth, but still moving towards the direction of doing what we love, right? And that's how our paths cross, is because we continue to go in that same direction, just in different ways.
Yeah, and since we both moved in that different direction, you've written more books. I knew you were always a writer in that sense and an editor. Um, and you're definitely an author. I like to write too, but I'm not as public about my writing than you are. So good on you. Because you and I have spent so much time also discussing books and authors and writing and stuff. Who is your favorite author that you love reading that just resonates everything about your life? Like, or just who is your favorite author that you enjoy reading?
I think the answer changes depending on, what sort of time frame you're in. Certainly, like, Bukowski lived a very, this is Charles Bukowski, he lived a very sort of interesting life that I don't think anyone else should try to mimic. From the womanizing to the alcohol drinking and so forth, and just being a heinous human being. And yet, he, through his page, the reason why I think he resonates is he just captures this side of America that I don't know is a little bit forgotten, and stuff like that, and so forth. And he just writes with, like, his sentences are so simple. Like people think Hemingway's writing elevated the English language, and certainly fine, he did. But
Mhm.
then Bukowski took it to the next level, of just such simplicity, right? And such quick chapters, and you're reading through it, and yet there's so much truth contained within that, that you can go on a deeper level. And so, yeah, Bukowski is one. Neil Gaiman, I think when he combines his fantasy elements, he does it in such a comedic way. Like Good Omens is one of the funniest books I've ever read. Graveyard Book is fantastic. Not that I've read much of his work, but I remember when we did Princess Bride, the book. I was I
Yeah.
was I was initially annoyed because he kept talking about like how he found this book and lost the pages. I was like, what the hell, bro? Where's the pages? But that was then I realized, oh, he's messing with me. Like this is
Right.
the book. And I thought that was brilliant. Like the movie itself is awesome, but the book I think just is on a whole different level of creativity.
Yeah, William Goldman. He was I what I loved about that book is Princess Bride, William Goldman. Everyone, if you haven't read it, read it. It's fantastic. Is that he had like self-awareness of that book where like a big fight happens. There's like a lot of swashbuckling. You guys don't need to know the details, so we're just gonna fast forward like 10 pages and like get to the end. And this person won, and we're like, "But no, no, we wanted to read that." He's like, "No, I'm saving you time," but he says that in the text, and it's like a perfect balance of you're so engrossed as a reader into this fantasy world, but then he takes you out, be like, all right, now we're just gonna fast forward and talk, and he breaks kind of like that fourth wall to the reader in the literary sense. But then he sucks you right back in with the story. And it's just I haven't read another book like that is so self-aware of everything he's telling you. And
Yeah, I mean, because
it's
like,
brilliant.
because that was the thing. He made up this thing like he used to listen to this story, and then he went and searched for the text, and he found the text. So he's like revealing what the book is. I'm like, well, just give me the book. But of course, the book doesn't actually exist because he made it up, and the whole thing is a farce. You know?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I think I told you about it. I don't know if you remember, but like when we read that book, I bought a copy from the Iliad bookstore in North Hollywood. If you guys haven't been there, go check it out. It's fantastic. I was just there a few weeks ago. I bought a book for like 7.98, like less than $8. It's a first edition of Princess Bride. Do you know how much that actually runs for? It's like
I'm
well
sure.
over $4,000 right now. And I got
Yeah.
it for $8. I was like, "Holy crap." And now that, William Goldman, rest in peace, he has since passed since we read that book. I'm sure that price just like shot up even a few more thousand. So I do
I'm
have a
sure.
first
I mean,
edition
kudos to him
of
because
Princess
yeah, I
Bride.
thought. I mean, I remember texting you at one point. I was like, "Hey, sorry, I think I'm reading the abridged version of this book."
Right. Right. And be like, "Nah, I got the first edition. Mine I'm pretty sure mine is unabridged." But no,
Yeah,
and no, I do remember you're like, "I don't think I have the right copy." I was like, "No, no, because like this book is jumping all over the page for me too." No, that's just the writing. It is seriously one of my favorite books that I've ever read.
yeah.
Princess
So
Bride.
I enjoyed those. I mean, there's plenty of other books as well. On the nonfiction side, like the Tao of Pooh is one of my favorites.
Dao
Um,
Ku? How do you spell
Tao
that?
of Pooh. So
Dao Ku.
like Taoism. So the
Oh,
Tao,
Dao. Okay, yeah.
and then Pooh, like literally poo. And literally the first chapter, the first few paragraphs literally start with that where Pooh comes in and he's like, "What are you writing?" The Tao of Pooh. The Tao of who? Like literally those are like the opening lines of the whole thing.
Yeah. Books that are self-aware, I gotta give it to you because you're like, all right, now I can get into this comedy or this type of mentality where they know what they're doing and they're aware of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I love that. All right, I'll have to
I,
read that one as well.
it's good. Yeah. I mean, for books that I don't like ones that like a lot happens, but there's like no dialogue where it's just like describing everything.
Mm.
One of my favorite books is actually The Baron in the Trees, written by Italia Calvino. And I wish it was like, it's a short book, but I wish it was elevated because so much happens and it's like, just give me some dialogue for it. You don't have to always just do it through action necessarily, you know?
Uh, yeah, and like the books that are very descriptive. I think one was The Revenant when you and I read it. Because, like,
Yeah.
if you really read that book, not much happens. You're following a guy who got attacked by a bear, and he's just literally crawling every single day to his next destination. And we're just following him crawling on the ground. And there's not a lot of dialogue other than like the beginning and the end chapter of that book. Um, and I think that's where it toes the line of like what movies are better than the actual book. And I don't know, I've read a lot of books where they were only okay, and I watched a lot of movies which were fantastic and way better than the book. So it's been like 50-50 for me.
Yeah, I mean, The Prestige is a classic example of one that I think is a far better movie than a book.
hmm
You know,
Cold
that's Chris
Mountain.
Nolan's.
Yeah, Chris Nolan's Cold Mountain was another one. That's another book about just following a man's journey back home. Yeah, there's been a lot, surprisingly so. Um, yeah, so you said Baron in the Trees, is that your well, one of your ultimate, but is there like a particular book that you've read like a million times over, you just keep going back to? Is there like that one book
Ham
that like
on Rye
really
Ham on Rye I can read
am I
over
right?
and over again, because A, it's like 200 pages. This is Bukowski. It's a coming of age story from literally his birth to college, and yeah, it's just Bukowski's very easy to read. I remember, after graduation in college, I read it. Like I sat on a park bench at the Boston, Common, and just in the span of 3 hours, just got through that book. Which I'm not a fast reader, by the way. So, that kind of tells you. But yeah, I mean, it's just a engrossing book in that way, and it's not to say that it's like my favorite book. I mean, there's so many great books, but I think one that I revisit, certainly that's one.
Yeah. Okay, Ham on Rye,
Ham on Rye,
like the sandwich, Ham on
literally
Rye.
like the sandwich.
Okay. I've never read Bukowski, but I'm always open to hearing new authors. I've definitely heard of him. I think mostly because of you, but I'm definitely open to
I think you will be
suggestions
highly.
of
You
authors.
will be. You will text me of like, what the hell am I reading?
You
Like,
like the obscure kind of stories, though.
I mean, Bukowski's not obscure at all, but and obviously he's more known for his poetry, so people really love his poetry. I mean, his books were very successful too. But there's this like one chapter where he learns about sex, and he's like, I think sex is good. It gives people something to think about. I knew I would want to do it a lot, and that's it. That's like you know what I mean. So he's just very to the point, and I love
Okay.
it.
I was like, well, sex, thinking about doing it is good, but actually doing it is better. I
Well,
mean,
I mean, but again, and then like, I mean, there's like a whole chapter on him just so excited to get home before his parents so he could masturbate. And like, not that it's that graphic, but I mean, it's just very
I
to
get
the
it.
fact he'd like, I zipped down my pants and grabbed my cock and, you know,
You
like
just
that
go
was
to
it,
town.
like literally he's just very to the point of with his writing. Like and so I don't know, like as far as writing styles, I really love that sort of philosophy. Like it's surprising that Bukowski never wrote a movie. I mean, there's been movies made of his work.
Mhm.
Mickey Rourke played him, um, but all the same, like he just has that sort of very script writing style, right? Like you can visualize it. It's very direct. The word choices, like he doesn't use adverbs, he doesn't use adjectives, like he just gets to the point and you can see it, you know?
Okay.
So
Descriptive.
very and but simplistic. Like it's, people think like that there's not much art to it. It's like, no, to be that direct is an art form because most people can't do it and get the point across.
Right. And like some people love descriptive kind of writing where you add the adjectives, you have to set the scene, lay down the foundation, like and like build and set the tone. So you can like get into the feel of what the atmosphere is like, and then you get to the actual action. And it seems like he just like cuts the fat and goes right to it.
He's like, if a sentence isn't action packed, why is it in the book?
All right.
Like he wants every sentence to be, and that's what made him a great poet, is because there was no wasted lines in his poetry. I mean, one of his, so it's called Oh Yes, and it goes, there are worse things than being alone, but it often takes decades to figure it out. And when you do, it's too late. And there's nothing worse than too late. And that's it.
Wow, that's deep. I
Right?
love
Like
that. Yeah,
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 it's
like
so
it
simple.
makes you think. It's simple and yet it's still thought provoking.
Yeah. My
I
other
love
favorite
that.
poem is Bluebird, um, where
Super.
he writes about a bluebird being in his heart, but no one knows about it. Here, for the benefit of your audience, why don't I pull it up real quick?
Yeah,
So
please
I do.
do.
There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him, inhale cigarette smoke, and then the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down there. Do you want to mess me up? You want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I lonely let him out at night sometimes when everybody's asleep. I say, I know that you're there, so don't be sad. And then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And when we sleep together like that with our secret pact, and it's nice enough to make a man weep, but I don't weep. Do you? So
Mm.
it's very deep. Yeah, kind of like having to be this cold person in a world that you would rather be soft to, but you can't because the world isn't not like that.
Right. I mean, it's also, I mean, first of all, thank you for reading that. But it's also, that's again with that self awareness, knowing that there's something soft and vulnerable inside you who keeps wanting to get out, and something that's beautiful and you want to show to the world, but you cover it up with all your like your flaws. And you're like, no, and you just bat it down, like, no, I don't need you right now. But I'm gonna keep you because you're still a part of me. And and like I'm just going to control you with all these other vices that I have.
Yeah,
Huh. Wow.
yeah. It's
Poetry. Poetry's hit and miss with me, quite honestly. I'm more rather a reader of novels than I am poetry. I don't know, because I think maybe it's just my experience that a lot of the poetry and writers that I read who write all that, it's just it's a little too obscure and a little too ambiguous. And then because I'm a person who needs to know answers, I'm like, but tell me what it is. What is this supposed to mean? And they're like, no, it can mean a lot of different things. But I was like, but no, I need to know the main reason. Like, don't
yeah.
tell me like the three things it could mean. Tell me the one thing that it's supposed to mean. And I think that's I personally don't like that. I was like, I just need to know the overall message of it. And if it
Well,
has like 10 meanings, I'm like, nah, I don't know.
Bukowski's pretty direct. That's what makes his writing, even his poetry, so accessible because of that. But it is interesting. Even like, remember Robert Frost's "The Road Not Traveled."
Yes, I have read Frost. Yes.
I like that's one. It's not that it even has many interpretations. It's that everyone just gets the interpretation completely wrong. They always think, "Oh, take the road less traveled." Really, if you read the poem, it's about man's self delusion because the roads are exactly the same.
Hmm.
He just happens to think, well, he's like, he makes a delusional choice that one is less traveled simply because of that. Like, it really is about self delusion and delusion. And
Yeah.
people completely like that just goes over their heads because they focus on the last stanza, as it were, versus the entirety of the poem, where he looks at both and they're completely identical.
That's the beauty of poetry, is that there can be different interpretations. And and it's weird when you have like two people or three people, however many people read the exact same thing, and we all have the different interpretations. And I think, like,
Yeah.
you and I, we encounter that a lot in our conversations when we talk about books. We read the same scene, but yet we come from different perspectives. Like, oh, I did not think of it like that. And I think
Yeah, I
that's the
mean,
beauty of conversations.
the first book we did for our new sort of book club, we did the Poppy War, and you're like, "What a happy ending!" I'm like, "She sold her soul."
It's like, well, and I love how you brought that up because I did finish that series with, I did read book 2 and 3, and each of them are like 600 pages long. So, not gonna lie, I read them like really quick because they were so good and so engrossing. And at the end, I think I might have texted you, I might have not, because I was so frustrated at the end of reading
I
book
know what
3
happens at the end, so
because
yeah.
it was so good yet so frustrating. I'm like, you can't end it like this. I'm not okay with this. I was like, I accept it. I completely understand how you
Oh,
got
she
to
ripped
this
you. I
point.
knew. Yeah, she
She
very much like
and
ripped your heart.
she just like, God damn it. And I invested so much time in reading all 3 of these books, and this is how you end it. But I was like, but yeah, I wouldn't know how to end it either. That's exactly how I would end it too.
And that was the
But I'm
thing.
not
Like,
okay
yeah,
with it.
it is a there. And I think in stories, like that's my one frustration with stories in general is when it's so good, but the sort of conclusion ends up being, um, I guess, I mean, I have to call a spoiler for this because it's a spoiler for a lot of other stuff, but where the
Mhm.
main character dies.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like when that's just like that's all there is to it. It's like, you know, um, because I think there's a better way. I understand that like it's very hard to figure out a more satisfying way, but that's the point. You can't just like, you know, oh yay, he lived happily ever after, but he's dead. You
Yeah.
know,
And I think that's the thing that you see with a lot of writers where when you know a series is ended, the only way to end is to have the main character die because you know that there is no continuation without the main character. And you see it a lot in television shows too. I mean, spoiler alert for Breaking Bad. I mean, like there are a lot of shows where they kill the main character and like, all right, we're done.
even
There's no
Frodo at the end
coming
of Lord of the Rings,
right.
he goes off to the Grey Havens. Like that's not, I mean, sure, it's peaceful, it's heaven, but it's death because he can't
Yeah.
live any longer with him.
Yeah.
Not, you know.
It's like that's sometimes authors find that's the only definitive way to end their story. I mean, look at Sir Conan Doyle. I mean, he wrote and killed Sherlock Holmes, and like he was done with it. And there was such an uproar, even from his wife. His wife didn't talk to him for like a year. And then he came back and like, all right, I'm going to bring Sherlock Holmes back from the dead. And that's how Hound of Baskervilles came out. People don't know that, but that's how it exactly like he was so ready to kill off Sherlock Holmes and he did. But, it's really like if
In
you
his
want
case,
something
was it a
to end, you
matter of
kill it in.
what was his a matter of like he just didn't want to write Sherlock anymore? Like, was it more of that nature of it?
I think that's a question you have to ask my father because he's more the Sherlockian than I am. I think it was just like he at that point he had so many stories already under his belt. It's just like, all right, next thing. Us being
That's what I'm
creative, like
saying. Because
we
like
just want to move on to the next thing.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Because like I could see that of like if you're a creative person and you create if you're blessed to create something so successful and everyone's like craving for it, but you in your heart, it's like I've done it. I've done this exercise. I want to do something else. Like I feel like I can do other stuff. It's that sort of catch 20.
Yeah.
Not catch 22, but whatever, right? Where it's like it's so successful, the only way to do it is to kill them off. But it's like that's not what the audience wants, and now you're like an indentured servant to your audience
Yeah.
that you built, which is great. But it's like, yeah, I have other stories to tell.
Right. I'm just glad, J.K. Rowling's didn't kill off Harry Potter because, that would have been frustrating. But
Oh,
she had
listen, if she
she had
did,
a definitive if she did, people would burn her books, which is,
they already
terrible
don't like
to
her that
even
much.
think. Oh,
So
I know. I mean, well, like in fairness, that was kind of like after the fact. But I'm just saying, like, we see a lot of authors, or just like a lot of writers in general, when they want to finish a work of art, they kill their main character
Yeah.
just to have
Okay,
a
this might
definitive
be
end.
this is a I'm laying out a whole landmine here, but I think
Okay.
well, because I don't know, if you want to go deep, the whole J.K.
Do
Rowling
less.
aspect of it, and it's not just her, right? Like I think it speaks to a larger issue of you know artists are messy, right? Michael Jackson, great
Hmm.
music, not necessarily the best human being. Even like there's aspects of there's certain movies that I've enjoyed of Woody Allen's that like I would still maybe venture back to, but like so,
It's
and I'm
now
not saying
tainted.
necessarily,
It's tainted by the person.
yeah, and I'm not saying like it's very interesting because I think it's just something we all have to grapple with because I don't think there's a singular answer of like, oh, if a person is heinous, don't support their art or so forth. Like, I think that is kind of the nuance of it all that we all have to grapple with. And I think it's a good thing we do have to grapple with because yeah, people are messy. And the truth of the matter is even people we think we disagree with, we have like 80% of most of the things in common. And so if we're gonna like work through the messy parts, let's start with the commonality first, and then maybe find a way through it all. You know what I'm saying? But I think
Yeah.
people just get too easily dismissed of like, oh, this person did this, therefore I'm not supporting this. And yet they are. I mean, like, let's all be honest, like it's all hypocritical BS because so many people went out and got Hogwarts Legacy. Okay, that's going to J.K. Rowling, right? Or
Yep.
like I remember when In the Heights, first came out, people were in such an uproar about the diversity aspect of it. And then it quieted down. 6 months later, it appeared, I mean, it went on HBO Max, but like 6 months later, all of a sudden I saw, everyone that I knew on Twitter that had been complaining about it, all of a sudden being like, what a great movie this is and whatever. And I'm like, you fucking hypocrites,
Right.
you
Oh,
know?
I know. There's this quote that I love, and I think it from one of my favorite shows, actually, Charmed. There's a line where you can love the work, but not the man. And, that can also go into, you can love the book, but not the woman. But it's more so like if you love the art that they created, you can support the art. Doesn't mean you have to support the actual person who created it. Just support the art and what it meant and like what it did to you as a person. I definitely know that feeling because this we're gonna lay it down. You laid down the bombs here.
Well, Buffy, right? You
But
love Buffy.
I love Buffy, but
That's a
now
very
Joss
troubled.
Whedon has tainted all that. But I love Buffy. Buffy is my ultimate favorite show. R. Kelly. I love his singing voice. There's all of his music from the 90s. Holy shit, it is so good. And it pops up on my iTunes like seriously every other week. I still listen to his music. Um, do I support him as a person? No. But I mean, I'm Your Angel, that's a great song. I Believe I Can Fly. I listen to that all the fucking time. So it's stuff like that. Like another one, Kevin Spacey. Completely, we know how that all went down with him and
Yeah,
how
I mean,
fast Hollywood was to call him out and blacklist him in that way. But like Pay It Forward, another one of my all-time favorite movies. I watch that all the time. I just watched it a few months ago. So like you can love the work and what they did as a person. And like as an artist, as a creative, whatever the art form is. But that does not mean you have to support the person.
yeah, and
And
especially like movies and TV shows, because I mean, granted that like excuse me, like a Joss Whedon certainly was a big, you know, hand in Buffy, but certainly
mhm,
it had other writers, it had, all the actors and then the crew, right? So it's like you're kind of crapping on their work. So I always choose to, if anything, look at it, I'm supporting those people, if anything, and the
yep.
work that they put in to make this as good as it can be. And I think, music and books might be a little bit more difficult, but certainly no art is created in a vacuum. I promise you that. Even authors who you think go off in garrets and write by themselves, they have editors, like there's so many
Mhm.
people involved, beta readers and yada, 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 that help bring that thing to life. So,
Yeah. And I think us as artists, we just support other artists. And I like to think that I'm more I'm more like I know people's art more than I know the person. And if I know the person, then I actually want to read about them. Like Diane Keaton. I've loved her work forever. And I have grown to respect her more as a person because I actually went out and bought her biographies and read her biographies and learned more about her as a person. So like it has to take like someone or something like truly special for me to go even beyond what I see on screen or read on text for me to know even more about them as an extension. And I think that's where people draw the line where like they just see whatever's in front of them and they don't go deeper than that.
Yeah, and I think overall, we just don't do well with nuance. We just want the
Yeah.
simplicity of it all, and unfortunately, life is very nuanced and messy. I mean, that's why, like, I mean, in the crisis climax of, movies, books, whatever, TV shows, it's either the lesser of two evils or irreconcilable goods. Like, you're not gonna get it all.
No, you're definitely not.
And maybe sometimes all four at the same time. That's the true great shit.
Yeah. Whoo. Goodness. I mean, I do love art and I always support other artists. Like I tend to support the smaller artists that people don't know of. People that like you see on Instagram that post on their own personal portfolio page and they're trying to, especially, and I've seen more during the pandemic, their personal shopping shops online like through Etsy or Redbubble or something, and a lot of my artwork, and I'm like looking at them as they're hanging on my wall that I bought through Etsy. And they're not commercial artists. They're just true artists in themselves. They put their artwork on out there in the internet, and I want to support them in that way. I buy like an individual print that's like signed by them that you won't get anywhere else.
Yeah, because I mean,
I like
half of
the
it.
one-on-one kind of artist.
I mean, because the big thing of it all that I absolutely hate, once you expose it, it's like the New York Times bestseller list is the biggest bullshit ever. You
Yeah,
can
because
buy it.
everyone's on it.
It's not that everyone's on it. You can buy it, right? You can manipulate it to be on it. In fact,
Mm.
there's books that should be on it that aren't because of whatever politics behind the scenes, right? So that to me is what's so upsetting of like this list that's supposed to be a meritocracy isn't, right? And so oftentimes, there's things that are on the best list, and I'm like, this is complete garbage. Whereas like something that no one's ever heard of, I'm like, this is such a hidden gem, you
Mhm.
know? Whether movie, book, doesn't matter. It's like this is what I want to be enjoying.
Yeah, and it's usually like those hidden gems I find from individual artists. There's for some reason I found on Twitter, and I think just because we're both readers, so I get a lot of like book author suggestions just via the algorithm and whatnot. There was an author who I've never heard of, never read her book. She posted a picture of she went to a book reading at a local bookstore in Tempe, Arizona. No one showed up. She showed a picture of empty chairs and
Oh
she
yes,
was
I
like,
saw this.
yeah, this is like a low life, low point in her career, and she went home crying. I'm like, oh my god, girl, I just felt for her. Like you put so much work into your art, and no one's there to read it. And I went and I bought her a book. It's stuff like that. I was like, I'd like to support artists who I know who struggle, who aren't, who don't have like the New York Times list to help boost their career and whatnot. They're just artists just trying to put out their work and no one sees it or doesn't have the proper, exposure in that way. So I like to think I help, support artists
Yeah.
in that way. Cause I,
And
I I understand the struggle.
and luckily, like, I mean, there's a happy story to it where others posted their experience of the same thing, right? So
Yeah.
she, and that kinship with her peers, made her feel better. And then, like you, other people were like, you know what, I'm gonna go out and buy the book. So it kind of became this great wave in that sense. And yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, if there's any like from me, one sort of solid thing that I look at that I imagine as like a movie scene that just so deeply resonates with me that I don't think ever will appeal to a massive audience, but like just me at the top of the stairs of the downtown LA library, just looking at all the books and realizing
Mhm.
two things. One, I will never get to read all these books. And number two, look at all these voices that most people will never get to hear.
Yeah.
And just something, I'm both like in awe of the amount of creativity out there, but also it saddens me that, yeah, it's just, you couldn't consume it in a lifetime even if you wanted to.
I know. I had the exact same feeling every time I go to the bookstore. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie City of Angels.
I have not.
Meg Ryan, Nicolas Cage, height of 1998. I saw that in theaters actually. I was a young kid at that time. But so to go off of that, there's the scene in the movie where Nicolas Cage, he's a guardian angel, and he goes to the library there and he's looking for Meg Ryan's character, Maggie. But because he's a guardian angel, he can hear everybody's thoughts. But when he's slowly walking through, there's a shot where he's walking through the aisles of the bookshelves and stuff. He can hear everyone's thoughts, and it's so quiet. And you just hear everyone just reading books. But he sits there, and there's a moment where he just sits there and he's hearing everyone's thoughts in the library. And it's like, it is beautiful, it is majestic. You're like, that's exactly how I feel every time I go to a bookstore or a library. Like, it is my comfort, happy place where there's just so many stories. So you're surrounded by all these, different lives and stuff, and you will never experience all of it because there's
Well,
too
that's the
much of
beauty
it.
too. I mean, so our good friend Khalil Abderrahim, I took him to get his LA library card because he hadn't had one.
Okay.
And, he was like, but I can get these books. And I was like, it's not about, listen, you Google search when you want something specific. You go to a library when you have an inkling for what you're trying to learn or find, but you're there to explore. You don't even know what you're looking for. That's why you go to those places, because yeah, if I knew what book I wanted to read next, sure, yeah, I'll Google it. But otherwise it's like, what's intriguing to me, you
Yeah.
know? So mm.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love it. I love that so much. Speaking of, because we keep bringing up movies and television and stuff like that. We have discussed so many movies. We have talked about so many televisions. Do I know your favorite movie? Your ultimate favorite movie
I
in
mean,
the definition of Phil Svitek.
that's always a tough one, but but it's also easy, right? It's The Matrix. Like that one has had the biggest impact on me. It's what inspired me to learn about philosophy, to want to be a filmmaker, and so forth. There's certainly like other movies that I absolutely love, and if I get to create a favorite list, but for me, the question is, what movie has had the most impact, right? And
Yeah.
certainly, like without a doubt, The Matrix for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, what more needs to be said about The Matrix?
Right, like the philosophy. I mean, that movie gets really deep, but also that was like a turning point. First of all, of the century, because that came out what 99, and
Yeah.
then and that was when the whole Y2K was was happening. That whole scare, and that movie just like had so many uh movie altering and groundbreaking elements in that film.
For
When it
Hollywood, that's the interesting
Yeah, for
part. Like,
Hollywood. When it came to VFX, came to storytelling, there was just so many new original, seemingly original ideas in The Matrix that we hadn't seen on a screen like that before.
yeah, I mean, certainly bullet time, that was an invention and so forth. But it is interesting, if you look up like a Hollywood movie inspired by anime, you will see so Inception by Chris Nolan. If
Yeah.
you watch the movie Paprika, it is basically Paprika, but done on a live
Big
action,
screen.
large scale, right?
Yeah.
Certainly The Matrix, like if you were a fan of William Gibson with Neuromancer or Ghost in the
Ghost
Shell,
in Shell. Yeah.
and certainly all like just the Hong Kong sort of action sequence, like it was all there. You know what I mean? So like, it's just very interesting how even for a great movie, like in many people's eyes, The Matrix is perfect as it gets. I found flaws, over the years, but all the same, like it's still a great movie that holds up. All the same, you can see the influences there, right? Like we're all influenced by X, Y, and Z, and you can peer through that space if you know what you're looking for,
Yeah.
you know? And yeah, I mean, I'm wildly fascinated by the amount of anime that gets translated to Hollywood movies and how everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is brilliant." It's like, if you
Yeah, but
knew,
it was in it originally in a different form.
it
And we
was, but I don't know. I guess there's a side of me that wishes some of that stuff was brought more into the mainstream.
yeah.
Because I don't know, especially with like animated movies, I think people feel like there's animated movies and also foreign movies. I think there's just such a disconnect of American audience, and I don't think it's like the disconnect of the audience. I think it's the marketing side of it, the promotional side that we're talking about with the books in general. Like I think there's so many things in general, art wise, that people could and would enjoy if people actually took the time to market it correctly. You know, so.
Do you truly think that it's like marketing
I
is
think it's
one of
laziness on
the
marketing.
hindrances?
I know it firsthand from my stuff. Like people get so lazy about how to market it. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
dealing with it with a Bogota trip. They're like, "Well, had you made it all in Spanish, and if it was about drugs and violence in Colombia?" I'm like, you've watched the movie. That's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to go for, because Colombia is not
Right.
all fucking drugs and violence. And so I was actually trying to show that there's a good side of Colombia, which is the majority of the fucking people there. So if you don't, no, I'm not going to perpetuate stereotypes just because it doesn't fit this fucking market trend analysis that you seem to have. Guess what? There's an audience out there. Find that audience.
Yeah. Yeah, and like again with the originality of your story, that because I personally don't know much about Colombia, and I felt like I saw a different, I don't want to say normal, but like a different common side of what you would probably see in Colombia if you go there. Because we hear Colombia and maybe is just the Hollywood aspect of what we put out there for the country of Colombia. There's there's drug trafficking, there's violence, there's killings, there's murder, all the graphic things that Hollywood likes to like amp up. Or like, oh, that's interesting. That's the one thing that we all know about Colombia. But and like me personally, I know about the coffee, but I don't know the everyday life that's actually in Colombia if you walk down the streets. And I felt like I got that with your story in your movie, because like, oh, this is what we would normally see. We wouldn't see the drug aspect in that way. We would see a normal person just walking down the street, living their life not that much differently than an American.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating. I mean, so Pico Iver is this writer who he's done a lot of traveling, and I actually saw a video of his, and I forget the exact quote, but it's like, if you're privileged enough to be able to travel, you owe it to yourself and to your fellow humans to do so. And like that really kind of gripped me, and I'm like, you know what, I really should, right? Um, and because I do think that aspect of it, yeah, same way how books allow you to travel, just traveling in itself allows you to expand your mind in that way. And, certainly from an outside perspective, if you're looking at America, it's like, okay, all you guys do is gun violence, January 6th. You guys are, arresting each other, with the
Mm,
president. Like you guys just in like, it's complete chaos, right? If like that's all you're observing is based on just news. It's like, what is this shit show in this country, right? And obviously that is ever present, but it goes back to that nuance thing. That's there, but at the same time, there's the daily life of people doing good and people just trying to survive. Like there's just so many aspects of life to it all
that we don't think of.
that we don't think of,
Yeah.
and it's not to say like it's all peaches and roses and all that, but it's all ever present. And I don't think people can hold more than one singular thought in their brain,
No,
you
I
know?
definitely can't. Yeah, speaking of countries and Colombia, since I've known you, I've seen you, well, more so, I have I know you've traveled to a lot more countries than I have. Paris. I mean, I've been to Paris, but like
Paris
I've
is in
seen
France,
you.
not a country, but
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, right. But like I know you travel a lot more than I do. You've been to France, you've been to, I mean, Slovakia so many times. Cuba, when you went down and Fidel Castro inconveniently died when you were there. But you've been to a lot of places, I'd like to say, more than I have. So, out of all the places you've traveled in your lifetime, what would you say is your like your favorite country to visit or just be a part of, other than America, of course?
I mean, America, if anything, is the least. But
Yeah, like
I did have an
we
awesome
suck.
time. Vienna, in Austria was amazing. I mean, everyone has like their charm. I did not care for London, if I'm being honest.
Oh,
Didn't you know?
what was it about London you didn't like?
I don't know. I just don't like the food is terrible. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I can agree
The
with
br-
that. Bangers and mash. No, thank you.
but yeah, I
But you
think
like Vienna. All right.
every place has its joy. I mean, more and more, one of the things I'm trying to really kind of orchestrate is to try to travel and live in places for 2 months. Because it's one thing to travel, like 2 months to me, like with remote work, seems like a great idea because I can do touristy stuff without feeling overwhelmed that I have to get it all together in 1 week. But I can also work there and, you know, by extension, I have to get my own groceries. Like I can't just be eating out all the time, right? So it would allow me to see and really integrate within daily life in that way and to see which place, truly is like a place that maybe I would want to live. On the
Mhm.
surface of it, I think I would want to live in like New Zealand. And I'm not like this big Lord of the Rings necessarily guy, but I just love the nature aspect and the integration of people. I don't know, just and obviously we know like some Kiwis, whether Kim Crossman or others. I don't know. It seems like a great place to go. And everyone
Yeah.
that's been, even like, our friend Sarah, who we keep mentioning, Sarah Stratton's traveled more than me, and
Well, she has a job that allows her to travel. So
yeah, she really loved New Zealand. Like she was there for 2 years, I think, almost.
that's crazy.
So
That's awesome. I mean, good for her. Yeah. I mean, I've never been to New Zealand. Ironically, I got into film to travel, or like I knew it would be a career that would allow me to like go to quote unquote different places than it was, me growing up in the very small town that I lived in. But ironically, I keep finding the jobs that are so sedentary and so solitary in one area, in one place. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to be here for the next few years of my life. Who knows? But I've yet to find the job that like allows me to explore, go to different places.
yeah,
So
and
I
part
like
of
to
it,
think I travel vicariously through other people.
yeah, I mean, our friend Tiana Hobson, she does various things that, for reality TV that take her to other places. But I don't know. I also at the same time couldn't see you like that stuff ends up being so resort based that I don't think
Mhm.
that's necessarily like I would never like when I say I want to travel, like I want to stay at maybe like an Airbnb so I don't want to stay in a hotel, right? Like I want a truer sort of interaction of the daily life. And that's what I appreciate. And at the same time, I don't know. Like part of it is you have to maybe carve that out. I don't know if you remember Justin Walter. He was a big Survivor fan,
Yeah.
hosted that show, and always wanted to travel. And then, eventually kind of stopped making excuses and just did it. And then it hit where now he's like a travel host getting paid to travel. But he made that initial first step of like, listen, I can't keep putting it off. If I keep saying I want to travel, then I've got to create that opportunity as opposed to, thinking it's going to come.
Yeah. Come to you. Yeah, and that's the thing, and like, we all have different lives too. That like I got dealt a few cards in life where I had to find financial stability because I didn't have it. And AfterBuzz, not gonna lie, left me in a very big financial hole. So I think it was just like at my point in my life, I needed to find financial stability, and I ended up finding a job that actually gave me that, but it is in one location. It doesn't allow me to travel, but like that's just everyone has their different things in life of where they have to be at that point. Um, and so like great for Justin. I totally remember him. He was always like energetic, and he definitely has that spark and that love to travel. But I like to get to that point where I'd be like, okay, I'm comfortable enough where I can actually do everything that I want to in life without being tied down by financial shit.
I th-
Being an adult, you know?
I think for me, a big shift was this aspect of what success is, and really defining it for myself, right? Because even with Khalil Abderrahim, who's our friend, he feels like if he moved out of LA, it would be like he's quitting, or like there would be this stink on him. And I'm like, why? Why do you think that?
Right.
And so for me, I used to buy into the very sort of toxic version of what success in this business is, right? Like $1 million house, live in LA, work on like, the most well-known movies. And I'm like, no, you know what? That's not for me. As long as I get to create what I want, work with who I want, then that is successful to me. And so that allowed me to redefine it for myself, and by extension, get rid of all the limiting beliefs. Like, it's like just being open fully about it. Like there's so many places in the world that even on a low budget you can go to, like Colombia. Why did we go to Colombia to film a movie? We went to Colombia because it was cheap as hell.
Mm-hmm.
I fed steak dinners to 15 people plus drinks for $200.
That's
That was it.
insane.
Here, I promise you that would have been bill for like $2,000.
Oh, for sure. I know. Like I treated my ex to very expensive steak dinner, and that was like 250, and that was just for one person, let alone myself that I also ate that night. That was a lot. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's shit that America, like our rates are so different from other countries in that way. But I like that ability about you that you can like find to do what you want to do, and you can do it in easier, cheaper ways. I don't think people have that tenacity.
well,
Um,
again, part of it's going back to humble. In that same way, I think, let's say everything went bad for me tomorrow, right? It's like most people would have gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle, whereas for me, I think part of what, if there is a danger to me of, why I will succeed in my mind, is because I'm willing to start from zero. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know, like people try to progress like it's some sort of, staircase or whatever in their career. And like, listen, I would love to have more resources for my third movie or whatever it is, but I also don't expect it. So if like it's literally me sleeping on the ground and like filming it myself and doing it all myself, then okay, I'll roll up my sleeves and do it all the same. Just like I would have when I was 15, or 20 or 25, like I'm still doing the same stuff. And I don't
yeah,
think anything's given to me, and therefore like it's all good. I don't need the 5-star hotel,
yeah.
you know?
Me neither. And like I like to think I'm very basic in my life, and not in like the terrible way. It's just like I just need a functioning car. It doesn't have to have a backup camera or electric locks or something like that. Even though my car does have electric locks, but I'm just like, I just need a car that gets me from point A to point B. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care the color. I'm like, I tend to be low maintenance in that way. I'm like, just give me whatever. If it works, great. I don't care about the look of things, or I just like if it gets me to where I need to be, or it gets whatever I need done, then great. It doesn't have to be like the highest quality. It just has to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like, and I do always I have always loved that like quality about you is that like, yeah, I think you and I both had that roll up the sleeve attitude when it comes to figuring something out. We're like, we don't know what the answers are, but we're gonna figure it out. We don't know how to do this, but we're gonna read this manual and we're gonna try it. Or like, it's just I don't think people have that patience to be like, I need it working now. It's like, no, you need to do the things so you can figure out how it works.
If I have any sort of frustration, it's that, like, if anything, I would be I'm tired of like having to prove myself to quote unquote my peers. It's like at
Yeah.
this point I've done 2 movies. Why are you questioning me when you've done none? Oh, because it's easy to criticize and whatever. But I like one of the things, people will say, well, why did you shoot, you know, so we shot at the Gold Museum, right? We shot it on a GoPro and this DJI. It's like, well, why did you shoot on that? It's like, because that's all I could take into the Gold Museum. Well, why did you shoot in the Gold Museum? Because the fucking Gold Museum, and I wanted it in the goddamn movie. I'd rather have the Gold Museum in the movie versus like, oh, just another apartment scene that looks great, is lit well. Like, no, I'm trying to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going for something to me, there's always a give and take with everything. And so, yeah, like what the quality might have been a little bit worse, made up for it by the fact that we're in the Gold Museum.
Yeah, it's the
You know?
location. It's not
Yeah,
like what you're doing or like what equipment you have. It's the fact that you're actually there and
yeah,
you still manage to document it in some way in whatever medium.
absolutely. So, and again, like I think people get so hung up on just that stuff. Like, you went to film school. If I have to hear another conversation of like, oh, I want to use this, I want to use the Red camera or the Alexa. It's like, if your first thing about talking any movie that you're making is the camera choice, then you're already off on the wrong foot. What story are you telling?
Right.
You
That's not
know?
true filmmaking. True
Yeah.
filmmaking is all the different aspects, not just the visual look.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like obviously camera choice, lens choice, all that stuff, very important. Same with like it all goes into it. But at the end of the day, for me, it's a very simple choice. Like what gets the movie made versus not. So I can sit on the sidelines and be like, okay, I need $1 million budget. I need this. And it's like, okay, it's just not coming right now. All right.
Right.
How do I take what I have and go make what I want?
Yeah. It's that innovative mentality of like, all right, we don't have X, so how do we figure out Z? Like, I have these different things. How do I still put it together? Or how do I make this work to still get the result that I want?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think it in that linear sense. And like, I think maybe that's just us as artists, we figure out another way to get to where we want.
Yeah. And
Um,
like, sometimes the critics like, listen, I can understand the criticism against my movies, but guess what? Both of them collected like the all-in budget is less than $50,000 for both. And it's not because I'm a cheapskate, but it's like that was primarily self-funded. And you
mhm.
know what? I see movies for $150 million that I'm like, wow. And I know I'm not the only one to like, they don't make money. They're panned by critics and so forth. So I'm like, so it's not the money. Like, if I had $1 million, yeah, I would take all the stuff that supposedly is a criticism and I would fix all that. But I don't have that money. And yet, something that has, you know, I can't even begin to figure out the X factor for that from going
Yeah.
from like $30,000 to 150 million. And you guys fucked up. You guys couldn't get it together.
Right.
So,
But you also have a director's mentality too. Like I can direct. Do I want to? No. I'm more of a producer rather than director. I like to think you're more of the director aspect, but you can obviously produce, but I think your priority is more directing. Um so but you have that director mentality where like, all right, we got to figure out how to get around and all the different angles of how to tackle, like think outside the box kind of thing, rather than what's in the box, if you know what I mean. Um
sure.
and I think the that's what makes a great director is that they can think in different ways, not just linearly in that aspect. So again, with the going off of the director tangent, who are some of your favorite directors that you love? Do you are like you maybe you've emulated in your career, or maybe that just inspires you?
So certainly a Wong Kar Wai, amazing director, did very famous Chunking Express, Fallen Angels, In the Mood for Love. Most people would actually know. So Everything Everywhere All at Once, all like the green tinted sort of romance style, like literally that's In the Mood for Love. That's a complete homage to In the Mood for Love. So that's Wong Kar-wai. Robert Rodriguez, I enjoy. Like, he has such versatility and just his passion for filmmaking, and certainly Rebel Without a Crew, which is the book
Rebel,
about
yeah.
making El Mariachi, is very inspiring. And then, from a grand scope, Christopher Nolan is fantastic. Although I have my gripes, I guess, with Chris Nolan, because like, when The Prestige came out, he like essentially, as far as I understand it, I mean, certainly buried the fact that it was a book, right? Um,
Mhm.
and rather than like make it be a thing to help promote the book. Likewise, too. I mean, again, I'm not saying you have to expose all your stuff, but like, I mean, Inception is literally paprika, and so it's like, I don't know, just give credit to where credit is due, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, but I think that's the thing as artists too, we get inspired by other artists. Um
we do, and I'm
Nolan's
not saying there's
inspired
anything
by
wrong with it.
Paprika. Right, no.
Just be honest about it, you know?
Yeah. And I think, well, Prestige, when you read that book, you're like, oh yeah, the movie's so much better. Because I think the thing with the movie is that it has the time to allow you to breathe and allow you to see characters and allow this rival between these two main guys fester over years, and how you can see it visually amp up and how they're topping each other in that way. So like it gives the audience the real time drama of seeing something build up to the climax of that movie. Whereas the book, where like it takes a dramatic turn, you're like, huh, that doesn't
No.
follow the tone that we've been reading for the last 300 pages. And so it's again, it's the different mediums and how someone can take it in the original story and change it and like make it better.
Yeah. And I think,
So
Guy Ritchie, I think, is doing some very interesting stuff currently. I think like he's in a lane of these not necessarily mid-budget movies, but like these sort of action movies that just don't get made, and so I really respect him for that. And you know, I have no idea what Barbie's going to be about, but Greta Gerwig, I think, is on a great sort
oh,
of
I love
trajectory.
Greta. Yeah.
So I think, and like, I mean, certainly when you get, you know, as a straight male dude, they announce Barbie, and you're like, and the fact that I'm this excited for it, because I honestly like, I think it's got a great cast, but really, I just trust that whatever take Greta is going to have on it will be worth it, you know?
I know, and I think it's also that we had Lady Bird, we had Little Women, which is also a story that's been done a million and a half times in a million and a half different ways in different mediums. But when she took such an iconic story and made it felt fresh and original after almost like what, like 100 plus years we've had that story now. It's that we know that Barbie, as ridiculous as the context is, we know it's in good hands because it's Greta.
No,
Because we know of the work and the comedy and the freshness and originality that she can bring to a seemingly not so PC kind of storyline. um, but no, I'm excited for it too. And I mean, it's a beautiful cast, so I mean, come on, we're there for for the superficial aspects of it as well. But knowing it's at the hands of Greta, I'm there mostly to support her, really, because as an artist, she's another female director that I personally always enjoyed her work, and I think it's going to be a hit. I'm excited for that.
yeah, I'm excited for that, and I just want comedies more in general too. I just don't think. I mean, they get made, but they usually generally go straight to streaming. Where I think, there's an audience. I don't know. I love like absurdist comedy, like Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. Like, yes, I'm in. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I don't think I've even heard of it.
Go
Barb
watch,
who?
and Jamie Dor what's his name for the guy from
Damon
50 Shades?
Dornan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has this amazing, like something happens midway through, and I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant.
All right. I do love stories that take a turn. Those are fun because you're like, whoa, what's happening now?
Well, you'll understand the absurdist nature of it within the first 5 minutes.
Okay.
In fact, the first, like after the first like opening credits, something happens, and you're like, oh my God. Like if you like Austin Powers, this is very much like a,
Oh, I
and it's
do
written,
love
it's
Austin.
Kristen Wiig and who's her partner? Um
She has a lot of different comedy partners.
the producers are also Adam McKay and Will Ferrell, so that kind of tells you.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
it's very SNL kind of pool.
yeah, certainly. It's Annie
Oh, Annie
Mumolo.
Mumolo.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But I mean, it's got an all-star cast of just amazing, amazing people.
Okay. I'll keep an eye out for it. So, out of all the projects you've done, whether it be writing book, completing couple films now, I mean, you have like a plethora of different art and mediums out there. What would you say one or two of your favorite projects you have completed in its entirety that like really, really you're like super satisfied as an artist?
It's always tough because, like, I mean, for me, I always get excited about the next thing. And so, like, the last thing was the most exciting thing. You know what I mean? And I'm very much, I don't know, as soon as it's done, it's like I've done what I needed to do for it. Now it's time for the rest of the world to catch up and see it. And obviously, there is that delay of when you finalize something to when it kind of hits audiences. And obviously have to be part of the promotion, but it's a weird disconnect because it's like mentally, even a Bogota trip at this point is a year ago. Like I'm done.
Hmm.
I've been there, done that. And same thing with like any books and so forth. So, right now I'm working on a filmmaking how-to book. So that's my next nonfiction one. I'm working on my second novel, and I'm excited for that. And just working on, I had bless my friends. They were like, okay, with your movie stuff, maybe it's more advantageous, like in terms of your career, if like you made short films and then like, use that as pitching material. I'm like, kind of want to do a trilogy. Like, are you serious? I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I am. And so I'm working on a trilogy. So, you know what I mean? I'm always kind of a look ahead type of a guy.
Yeah, that's great because a lot of people look back. I mean, look at what we've done this entire conversation. It's like we reflected a lot, and that's a great thing to have because I find artists get so wrapped up in the work where they can't think of the next thing, because they're not satisfied with what they put out there, or like they can't find that motivation to do the next thing because they got so bogged down by their last project or what have you. I find myself as a writer, there's actually, because I do write, um, there's actually a story that I've been writing for the last 2 months. It's actually out there in the world. People have read it. I won't tell you what it is, but I told the readers that there are 20 chapters. Like there's a definitive end. I'm literally on the last chapter. The first 19 are already out and published. People have read it, commented, liked it, all that stuff. And I'm on the last chapter and I'm having a hard time letting it go because once I publish it, I know it's done. And I don't know what my next story is out there. So
Well,
me
you could take the
myself,
time. You could
yeah,
take
it's
the
like,
time. I mean, the hard part is you would think like, oh, as you do more and more projects, that it gets easier. It, I've everyone I speak, like it never gets easier. You're always back to
uh,
square one with the project, And yes, you've gotten better. You have a greater skill set. You have more knowledge and so forth. But you're literally staring at the proverbial blank page
yeah.
again. You
You're at
know,
you're not at the next thing. And here, like, I have this I'm finishing the story, but now I'm starting this next project. This being, one of them, this podcast and whatnot. And I think it's just us as artists. we're always looking to the next thing. We're always trying to find the next creative project that will keep us going in life, that will keep us driven, keep us motivated, all those adjectives that just keeps us living,
The
that
true
keeps
artist, because there's a lot of
right.
people who would just want to like reflect back. Like I equate it to there's this notion of a lot of people want to be married but not get married, meaning they want the kids, the husband, or the wife with a white picket fence and all that. But it's like you got to go on all the dates, you gotta
Yeah.
whatever, right? And so same thing with art. It's like you don't just have a book; you have to write a book. And guess
Mhm.
what? I'm sure you get this in your own version of it too. Of like, oh my god, that's so great that you did that. And it's like, yeah, that was literally me staring at a screen for whatever amount of time, weeks, whatever. And it's like, so that's available to anyone, except they don't want to do it because they want to have the thing but not do the thing. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's like you want to have the end result, but you have to actually put in the work first, you know?
yeah. And it's
It's
the
that
work that sucks.
it's the instant gratification that we're so conditioned now that we're like, we just want the end product right in front of us. Like, no, you gotta put the hard work and elbow grease and sweat and tears and all the cuss words that go with it into it.
And it's
I
work.
know. I just wrapped up a video for that I worked on the last 3 weeks, and it gave me 3 anxiety attacks, but I finally had it air in front of hundreds of people and got an okay response. But myself, I was satisfied. I was like, holy shit, I did it. It played on a big screen in front of big people at a very, very historical location. And I'm like, all right, me as an artist, I'm satisfied because I did the work. It
You
was
did it.
hard, but I did it and I'm satisfied. Um, yeah, goodness. Well, Phil, this has been fantastic. You are a dear, dear friend of mine. I can't say it enough. You know how much I love and respect you over all these years.
Likewise.
And because this is my show and we were talking all about you, but like let's leave it on positive, more happy
As
notes
if I
for
wasn't positive.
me. Yeah, no, 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 you were. But I like to think I know a lot about you and I have a lot of favorite things about you and whatnot. But what would you say is your favorite thing about me?
So what I like is your when you're excited about something, you can always tell because like you do this ooh ooh and like if you're in person you do the ooh ooh or yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's fun and infectious, and you're a big champion of great artists. Whether it's the Hallmark everything. I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out a way to summarize it, but everything. Like yeah, your passions range quite a lot. And so I think that's a beautiful thing to have you positively infect others with that same sort of spirit.
Oh, well, thank you, Phil. And thank you for being on my show. I always love talking to you. And honestly, you're one of the few people that I can actually call on the phone rather than text and actually have a full, meaningful conversation. So thank you so much for being on my show.
Absolutely.